So when all the commotion after the raid ended, people bustling about, talking, I don't really remember a lot of details. But I do know that Mike wasn't there. And I had asked Steve Schneider where Mike was. Mike said that he had been at the mag bag and that he had called in this morning and asked what we were doing today. And Steve told him that we were in a raid. And Mike asked Steve, what do I do? And Steve said, well, I guess you try to get here. So that's all I knew at the time. That's all Steve told me. Nobody had heard from Mike, so we didn't know. But later on that evening, we heard a radio announcement, and I heard this directly from the radio, that said, 3 men came out of Mount Carmel, guns a-blazing. And 1 was killed, and 1 escaped, and 1 was captured. And since I knew that Mike had been at the mag bag with Bob Kendrick and Norman Allison, and I knew these 3 characters, I immediately knew that Mike was dead. The news media only reports what the government wants them to report. So if the government says, oh, I want you to throw this headline out there, 3 men came out of Mount Carmel, guns a-blazing, then that's the headline, even though there's absolutely zero truth to that. 3 men were trying to walk into Mount Carmel. But knowing the characters of these 3 men, I immediately knew when I heard, even though I knew it was false, I still knew that Mike was dead. I knew that Bob Kendrick had escaped. The man has, survived multiple heart attacks. Norman Allison had been captured. And that's just because I know the characters of these people. I knew them all. I knew the characters of everyone that I lived with really, really well. We all did. All Mike was doing was what Steve had told him to do. I guess you try to get back here. Steve didn't say, Mike, come back to Mount Carmel. Steve told me that he said to Mike these exact words, I guess you try to get back here. Mike took those to mean, Mike, do everything in your power to get back here. Because Mike didn't take anything or do anything halfway. It's not in Mike's genes to do that. So he would give up his life trying to get back to Mount Carmel because that's what he felt he needed to do. I also heard that from the government's perspective, that Mike shot at them. I, having been ex-military and having had practiced with weapons prior to the raid, we had target practice. I was teaching other people how to properly hold weapons. Mike was not a weapon person. He didn't care for them. He had a weapon for protection. He didn't like shooting it. But the story from the government side was that Mike shot at them, that they had told him to stop multiple times and he kept shooting at them, so they finally killed him. Well, another element that I learned was that Mike's gun, his Glock, was jammed. Knowing what I know about weapons, I know that most cases, it's possible, but in most cases, when a gun's going to jam, it will do so on the very first bullet in the clip. So I'm not 100% sure that Mike shot anybody. I'm not 100% sure he didn't, but with his lack of ambition to shoot a gun and the fact that I was told his gun was jammed, I believe he didn't shoot anyone. I believe he was shot. 7 times, 5 of those shots being fatal. 1 to the side of his head. 1 beanie cap missing, gone. Even though somebody saw it in the locker room, in the evidence locker room, it was there. They took a photo of it, but it disappeared. So I have no case. Although I know they shot Mike in the head just to make sure he was dead. Even though they'd already shot him 4 other times, all of those shots were deadly. Killed him. And then they left his body in the field. Just left it there. Coyotes are just going to tear it apart. They didn't care that he was a human being. They didn't care that he had a family. I'm not just talking about me and Brian and the rest of his stepchildren. I'm talking about the entire Mount Carmel group of people. We're all his family. Government doesn't care. They see a human being that they don't want to trespass on this property, and he is now a murder victim, plain and simple. Nothing we can do about it. Mike was the kindest, the gentlest, the most forgiving, and the most loving person. He probably had more feminine traits than I have. And he loved me, and he loved God. He loved everyone more than he loved himself. And he would have done anything he could just to be with us. So when he died, yes, I feel sad for myself and for all of the rest of Mike's family because we don't have him anymore. And that's selfish. But the real feeling that I have is that Mike made it to heaven before I did. Mike's love for God got him where he wanted to be. I never even made it there. But I'm jealous of Mike. Not because he's dead, but because his belief in God was that much stronger than mine, that much fuller and devout than anything I could imagine mine to ever be. And I'm proud of him, and I will always love him, and always respect what he did. I will always love and respect Jadine Wendell, who also died that day. And she had a young child. I will always respect Peter Gent, Peter Hipsman, Perry Jones, Winston Blake. People that didn't deserve to die that day. They may have shot at federal agents, and they may have been shot in retaliation. But the federal agents shot at us first. I know that. In the bottom of my heart, I heard those dogs yell. The dogs were the first ones to get shot. I know that. And the federal agents have no law over them. They get to do whatever they want and get away with it. And the only reason we had to go to court and fight for our lives after all this was because 4 of them died. Conway LeBleu, Robert Williams, Steve Willis, and Todd McKeon. They didn't deserve to die. They had leaders that made them do something they should not have done. Every single one of those guys that came out of that cattle trailer should not have done so. And every gunshot that got shot that day should not have happened. But everyone that died that day, including Michael Schroeder, should not have died, didn't deserve to die. But that's our government taking action because they feel like it. Oh, wait a minute. For the Appropriations Committee, they filmed it so they could get a budget increase. Really? I hope Conway LeBleu and Todd McKeon and Robert Williams and Steve Willis's lives were worth it. Because I don't think they were. And I don't think any of the 6 Branch Davidians that died that day, I don't think their lives were worth it either. ATF did not need to be there. They needed to do things the right way, and they didn't do that. The FBI, they needed to be there. They needed to come clean up the mess the ATF made. So I feel for the FBI, the negotiators. Although they lied, everything that I heard on the news media, Bob Ricks, everything these guys were telling the news media and putting words in people's mouths that started getting a negative connotation for every single Branch Davidian in that compound. I blame it on Bob Ricks and team. Jeff Jamar, I blame it on them because they had to come up with a way to make us evil so that the entire nation, no, the entire world would be on their side. Why is there a side? Why is the United States government having to pick a side over American citizens? That's mind-boggling. That should never happen, ever. I don't care what that human being did. The American government does not need to pick a side and get all of the rest of the American population on their side against any American citizen. That's what courts are for. That's what lawmen are for, and jails and sentences. Not raids on unarmed properties or armed properties. That's not what this country is about. But every single one of us that stayed in Mount Carmel after the deaths of 6 of our loved ones, and the fear of David's death, because he had been shot as well, and Judy had been, other people had been shot. So there was fear of more death. With the lack of resources we had at our hands, we definitely feared more pain and more death. But in the days after that, there was chaos, there was commotion, and there was, what does God want from us? What does God want from us? This is what we had to learn and figure out.